This past summer at the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalists, the UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, gave a sermon in which she proclaimed, "This is no time for a casual faith." She went on to say, "Our faith is calling more from us in this time. And two things are absolutely clear to me right now. Number one, this is no time for a casual faith or a casual commitment to your values, your community, your congregation, your soul, and your faith. And number two, this is no time to go it alone or to think that we are in all of this alone. This is no time for a casual faith. As UUs, we are first and foremost religious communities that practice love as our foundation. We are living in times of heartbreak, violence, and pain, and in this time, we need communities that remind us of our humanity. I also know that our faith is strong. If we let ourselves be held by it, it will give us what we need to keep on moving forward. So there are going to be 4 takeaways from her words that I want to emphasize this morning. Number 1, this is no time for a casual faith. Number 2, this is no time to go it alone. Number 3, we need faith communities to remind us both of our humanity and who we really are. And 4, to let ourselves be held by this faith tradition. I remember a 30-something from a past congregation I served who said that he literally stuttered when he tried to say the word church. He desperately wanted to call the fellowship something else. Because what 30-something goes to church anymore? And then there are those of us when asked, "What'd you do on Sunday?" swallow the last word in this sentence. "I went to church." As if they should be embarrassed by this fact. That it was somehow shameful, especially when so many other folks are sleeping off whatever they did the night before. How many of you have found yourselves asked if you go to church, and when you say yes, "I attend the Unitarian Universalist Church," the response is that really a church? Oh yeah, I know that church, it's Unity. Or the UCC? Why do people say that UCC stands for Unitarians Considering Christ? But even more challenging is when they say to you, Universalist, they usually say Universalist Unitarian. Unitarian Universalist, what is that? Do you have an elevator speech prepared to respond to and answer that question? Very good. So for those of you who don't know what an elevator speech is, this was a phrase that the former president of the UUA, Bill Singford, came up with. And he says, "So what if you're in an elevator and you got 10 floors to go? And somebody says to you, 'What's a Unitarian Universalist?'" That's the elevator speech. And I think I might have shared with you what Bill's was. His was, "God is one, nobody left behind." That's pretty smooth. But you probably have some other answers. But what I often hear people say is, "Well, we accept anyone and everyone, and you can believe whatever you want." Yep. And if that is the answer about who we are, I will say to you that and that answer is wrong. And yes, I just said that. It is wrong. We do not accept everyone and anyone. I feel no need to welcome or defend in worship white supremacists, anti-Semites, or those who practice rituals that are intended intentionally to cause harm to others. Nor do I believe that being a UU means believing whatever you want and calling that faith or religion. Number 1, that's spiritual laziness. And 2, there is something pretty whacked about some of the thinking that's out there and tries to pass for religion or spirituality. When I was 16, I read Flannery O'Connor's book, Wise Blood. I was too young to be reading that nonsense. But she's got a protagonist in that book that starts a church called the Church Without Christ. Now, what the heck does that convoluted wording and thinking do for the human spirit? Or the man from a tent city, from my former congregation, who came up to me and said, I'm a vampire and I need to go on a kill. And he was serious. Or how about the rhetoric that blames the victim for their illnesses, that if they just had right thinking, they would not have gotten cancer? Really? Now, thought is powerful, and it can be an incredible part of healing. But I refuse to blame the victim and call that religious. Or look at what religious extremism does in the name of its God: blows up reproductive clinics, beheads journalists. Karen Armstrong, a former nun and now a scholar of comparative religion, author of many, many books, said that the definition of any true religion is that it has compassion at its core. Compassion at its core. And I want to say to you that Unitarian Universalism is anything but a casual faith. We are descendants in a long line of heretics, those who choose, who have bucked narrow Christian thinking and proclaimed God is not triune, but one on the Unitarian side, and the formerly unheard of and frankly rather radical assertion that humanity is not forever damned by original sin, but is good and even loved by the divine, and that all souls are saved. Though we are no longer a singularly Christian faith, and we embrace a plurality of sacred sources and the findings from academia and the sciences as part of what helps us understand who we are not a casual faith. We stand or roll on the backs of those who came before us in faith, who were martyred for it, and we have inherited a great legacy. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal faith based on values and principles that guide our lives and call us to act from and for those very principles. That's a pretty simple elevator speech, right? But here's the thing. These principles, they're a huge challenge. How many of you have come to grips with what it means to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person? Every person? Every person? The former president of the UUA, Bill Schultz, who then went on to become the president of Amnesty International, wrote a great sermon about this. Because when he became the president of Amnesty International, he hung out with the tortured and the torturers. And he said, never again will I preach a sermon, or do I want to hear a sermon about dancing leaves. I need you to talk about what's real, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And have you accepted that one person embraces God and that another is allergic to God? How do we then encourage one another to discover and grow in our spiritual lives when we may not share a common religious language or understanding? The fourth principle is the one that invalidates the claim that you can believe anything that you want to and that all are welcome. And that all hangs on one key word: the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Going on a kill as a vampire is anything but responsible. And I question withholding medical treatment of children in the belief that God will heal or not heal, and that there is no need to mourn the dead. Supporting one another in the right of conscience and engaging in the democratic process versus autocratic or tyrannical processes. This is not a my way or the highway somebody say it. Individualistic faith. It's a community built and held to mutually binding covenants of right relations. And how are we doing with ensuring that world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all? Why aren't we all down at the southern border putting our bodies down where they want to build a wall? And our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. How do we save what's left in the next 12 years before they tell us that we can't turn it around? This is what we affirm and promote as Unitarian Universalists. There's nothing casual about it. So, my friends, get over the word church. Use the word congregation if you have to, because that's what we truly are, a gathering of people in community. And when asked what you did on Sunday morning, tell folks without apology where you were, what you heard that day, what this tradition means to you, and invite folks to join you in being in this place on Sunday mornings. Did you know that 80% of people who show up to church do so not because of the preacher, but because somebody invited them? Somebody invited them. Wearing our yellow shirts with the slogan, standing on or answering the call of love isn't enough. Do you know how hard it is to do and be in this world? Given the suffering and the pain, to answer and act from love and compassion? No, Unitarian Universalism is no casual faith, and these aren't casual times when our faith tradition gets to sit comfortably on the sidelines. It needs to show up on the public square in as many ways as possible. And I want you to hear this quote from Seneca from 4 BCE. It's no less relevant today. This is no time for playing around. You have been retained as counsel for the unhappy. You have promised to bring help to the shipwrecked, the imprisoned, the sick, the needy, to those whose heads are under the poised axe. Where are you directing your attention? What are you doing? Seneca, 4 BCE. Secondly, we cannot be or embody this faith alone. We cannot be the voice and actions of resistance and resilience given what we are up against in this world if we are to do it only on our own. We need co-conspirators. Don't you like that word? Way more better than ally, way more better than advocate. Co-conspirators. And because we know that together, we say this all the time, that we can do and be what we cannot do and be alone. I want to take this idea of community one step further and dare to say that Unitarian Universalism saves lives. When folks come through those doors, mostly those doors, sometimes those doors, maybe those doors, there's probably another entrance, I don't know. All I know is that we can't make this place safe with that many doors. Anyway, you know, I don't think they're looking for a social club or a political group. Many will say they're looking for community, a place where they can find folks who share their values, where who they are will not just be tolerated or accepted, but embraced, affirmed, welcomed. Folks who come through our doors with needs and pain, hoping that this place, this community, this faith will give them whatever it is that they need to survive and to thrive in this world. They are looking for a religious place to call home. A place where they are welcome, not in spite of who they are, but because of who they are. In the 1980s until, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, our churches, Unitarian Universalist churches, were populated by refugees from other religious traditions. Today, many who come through our doors have no past experience with church, synagogue, or mosque. They are not so much escaping something as seeking something. And I suspect that what they are seeking is community, belonging, challenge, and a way to act on their values, a way to be lifted up and fed spiritually and religiously, to find some takeaway from worship each week that will sustain them through the rest of the week. In Judaism, there's a wonderful concept of the Sabbath or Shabbat, and they call that the Queen of Days. And they say it is the day from which all other days are lived. And that is what our worship is created for, to give all who gather something to live from for the entire week, something that will sustain them. So, my friends, as Sam said in the welcome, come into this circle of community. Know that you are not alone and that you do not have to save or change the world alone. Know that you are held in and lifted up by this very religious community. Attend to your spirit and your soul. This community is life-saving. It functions as a kind of grace, which the writer Anne Lamott defines this way: as meeting you exactly where you are at your most pathetic and hopeless, and loading you into its wheelbarrow, and then tipping you out somewhere else in ever so slightly better shape. Thirdly, a 15-year-old UCC teenager said as part of her credo or faith statement that church is the place that I go to when the world has forgotten who I am. Now, put those words next to the ones from Steve, that member of that UU congregation in Washington. If I did not pledge, I would lose track of the truths about who I am. By pledging, I remember who I am. Bet you never heard a pitch for financial support or money like that one. That giving to this church, this faith, helps you not lose track of the truth of who you are. That in the act of supporting giving, you are remembering who you are. Turn on the TV, any social media, tune into it, the radio, pick up a magazine or a paper, and you will believe that we are both helpless and hopeless as a species. Not possible without the capability, without the possibility of redemption or restoration. But our faith calls us to remember our own humanity and that of others. It calls us to resist the helplessness and the hopelessness, the squandering and the greed when it comes to resources, the labeling and othering that seeks to keep us from one another, from true community. Unitarian Universalism has good news. Did you know that's what the word gospel means? Good news. And we have it too. It's music, it's readings, it's worship, it can be restorative. It can be bread for this journey of what is possible when we put down the papers and we turn off the radio and we tune out from TV and social media and we start believing our own lived realities and truths and those of folk gathered here week after week. Susan Fredericks Gray preached that our, meaning Unitarian Universalism, is strong. If we let ourselves be held by it, it will give us what we need to keep on moving forward. Did you know that the word Islam means surrender? I think we have something to learn from our Muslim neighbors. Think about the relief of no longer pushing and struggling and going it alone, but letting oneself let go and surrender. That's not powerlessness. That's allowing oneself to be open to something larger than the self. Anne Lamott also says, what's a higher power? Anything that's not you. Being open to something larger than the self. That's not self. In my own life, I've repeatedly experienced that the way forward comes when I stop trying to create it. When I stop pushing and not give up, but give in to the reality that my efforts are producing squat. Frankly, it's a great leap to surrender. Are we Unitarian Universalists, I'm going to use Mary's word, audacious enough, courageous enough, vulnerable enough to let this faith hold us? To give us what we need to keep on moving forward? This chalice, as my colleague, the Reverend Marion Stewart says, guess what? It's big enough to hold us all. And so is this faith. Never underestimate it or apologize for it, but live it boldly, proudly, and out loud. But wait, you say, wasn't this sermon supposed to be the pitch, the ask, the request for money? Well, if you were paying attention, Eileen, you will realize that it was. That this faith is not casual. That this faith is its own pitch, and it speaks for itself. That this faith will remind you of who you are. This faith will not let you lose track of the truths that define meaning for you. This faith will not let you lose track of your own truths. And so my ask of you, to embrace this faith and to let yourselves be held by it, to live in it and from it, and to remember who you are.
Amen.